Happy Thursday, everyone. You're watching CBC News BC. I am Jessica Chung here in the CBC Vancouver newsroom. Here's what you need to know today. We're going to start off with some national news. Prime Minister Mark Carney will dissolve Parliament and call a federal election this Sunday. Now, a date has yet to be confirmed, but sources do say that voters are expected to cast their ballots on either April 28th or May 5th, meaning the race is set to get underway just 2 weeks after Carney replaced Justin Trudeau as Prime Minister. And more than a dozen people have been hospitalized after an early morning apartment fire in Burnaby. Now, it happened just before 3 a.m. at a high-rise building near Hall Avenue in the Edmonds area. And Burnaby Fire says nearly 50 firefighters were on scene to fight the blaze. It says 13 people have been hospitalized, with 2 of them in critical care. It also says the whole building was evacuated and around 20 people have been displaced.
Looks like quite significant damage on the 4th floor because the door of the fire compartment was left open. And it's really important that if somebody has a fire, that they do close the doors. Fire doors are rated and they will protect from the smoke and the flames.
Now, a stretch of Kingsway is also closed to traffic, and Burnaby Fire says they're still investigating what happened. And the property is run by BC Housing. Its website says residents pay 30% of their monthly gross income to live there, and homes there are for people 55 and older or people younger than that with a disability. Now, the seafood industry on BC's north coast is bracing for impact now that Chinese tariffs on Canadian seafood have been imposed. The 25% tariff is in response to Canadian tariffs on Chinese aluminum, steel, and electric cars. And crabbing vessels that operate between Haida Gwaii and Prince Rupert are concerned.
These tariffs are going to hit pretty hard, though. When you're out there working on the rough waters, and then to hear that you're going to have, probably more than a 25% reduction in your catch for your price for your catch, that's gonna hit hard out there. Anything that we can do to sort of have the government take, immediate action to sort of resolve these conflicts would be extremely beneficial and helpful to our coastal communities.
And these tariffs are separate from the looming tariff threats from the U.S. that are slated to come into effect in around 2 weeks. Now, Ellis says their members will be focusing on strengthening the crab market here in Canada and expanding to other foreign markets. And a new study out of UBC finds that TikTok has a lot of popular content that focuses on ADHD, but most of that content is inaccurate and has influenced how young people perceive the disorder. Now, the study found that out of 100 most viewed TikToks about ADHD, less than half of the claims made about symptoms actually align with clinical guidelines.
I recognize that most of them come from a really good place, that they want to connect with others. Maybe they want to share their experiences, make other people feel better. That's wonderful. But words have power, and when you have a platform, you yield a certain amount of power, and you have to be a little careful about that.
She says the key takeaway of the study is not for people to stop using social media to talk about mental health, but rather to caution users to fact-check information that they find online. And that's it for me. I am Jessica Chung. You are watching CBC News BC. Stay here, don't go anywhere, because BC Today is up next.
Good afternoon. Thanks for joining us. The stage is set. CBC News has learned Prime Minister Mark Carney will ask the Governor-General to dissolve Parliament and call a federal election this Sunday. The move comes amid rising poll numbers for the incumbent Liberals and tariff threats from the U.S. President, among other things. What are your big election issues? Will you vote? Have you made up your mind on who you will support? Plus, in the face of tariffs, climate change and other pressures, what would it take to make BC self-sustainable for food? I'm Dan Burrett in for Michelle Elliott. Welcome to BC Today on the first day of spring. Thank you for joining us on radio, TV, and live stream. You can call us now on our top story. With the federal election being called on Sunday, what are your big election issues? Our number is 604-669-3733. You can reach us at 1-800-825-5950 or hit pound 690 on your cell phone. You can also email us bctoday@cbc.ca. As you may have heard, Canadians will soon be going to the polls. CBC News and Audio Canada have learned Prime Minister Mark Carney plans to call an election this Sunday. A campaign is expected to last between 36 and 50 days. Sources tell us voting day could be either April 28th or May 5th. The Prime Minister spent part of the day on the ice with the Edmonton Oilers as they prepared for a game against the Winnipeg Jets. Carney wore an Oilers jersey with number 24 on the back after being sworn in as Canada's 24th Prime Minister just 6 days ago. He also grew up in Edmonton during the Oilers dynasty of the 80s and played goalie at Harvard. He also spent part of the day meeting with Alberta Premier Danielle Smith. Meanwhile, federal Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre spent part of the day in Quebec. He was asked about his campaign's decision to block journalists from traveling on his party's campaign plane during the election. He argues it's an opportunity to hear from more local reporters.
We will have open media across the country. Local media will have the ability to ask questions. It will be refreshing to hear from local outlets on what they have to say about their local priorities. And I would note that I'm answering a lot more questions from the media than Mr. Carney, and I think he should open up in answering more questions himself, particularly about his many millions of dollars of conflicts of interest.
Federal NDP leader Jagmeet Singh, meanwhile, was in Edmonton, where the party announced it's being endorsed by the United Steelworkers. Singh has been facing questions about his party's slip in opinion polls.
This is a very important election. And I know that Mark Carney and Pierre Poilievre would want nothing better than the NDP to disappear so they can continue to give big gifts to the billionaires, to favour rich CEOs, and not have us point out that actually we need an economy that works for working people. I'm sure they would love for us to not point out that they've completely ignored working people. News for them, news for everybody. We're not going anywhere. We're always going to fight for working people. We're not going anywhere.
And again, Jagmeet Singh was in Hamilton, Ontario, where he received an endorsement from the United Steelworkers Union. Some of you have already called in. We're going to get to your calls in just a moment. For more on all of this, we're now joined by Hamish Telford, Associate Professor of Political Science at the University of the Fraser Valley. Hamish, always great to have you on the program. First of all, what do you make of the timing here? A Sunday election call just a week after Mark Carney became Prime Minister.
Yes, well, this was the worst kept secret in the country, that Mark Carney was going to call an election before Parliament was recalled on Monday. And of course, with the Liberals flying high in the polls, he wanted to get right to it, and probably a short campaign. The prospective date looks like April 28th. And really, with the Liberals doing so well in the polls right now, the job of Mr. Carney is not to mess it up. And Pierre Poilievre and Jagmeet Singh have to figure out how to get back into the game.
Let's go to Rick in Penticton. Rick, what is your big election issue?
Hi, thanks for taking my call.
You bet.
For me, actually, I know it's gone down in the rankings of important issues, but for me, climate change is number one. And that's because everything that we depend on rests on the foundation of a stable climate.
Where are you seeing the effects of climate change acutely in Penticton, Rick?
Oh, well, the last 4 or 5 years, we've had massive fires every year. This valley, Okanagan Valley, fills up with smoke. We've had fires within 100 meters of our house. combined with drought, it's putting pressure on the drinking water systems and irrigated water. Plants are suffering. And, the plant communities are changing around here, so changes are obvious, and it's only going to get worse for the future generations. So we need to take action now.
And Rick, if a politician is listening, what would you say to them as a way to pitch them on the environment, or the climate change, if I can use that phrase?
Sure. Well, I would just say that the economy is important, but you can't have a thriving economy when the climate's in chaos. And we see that in, for example, what just happened in LA with those fires, or the whole town of Jasper, half the town burning down. These are massive economic costs. And if the economy is the most important thing, then climate really needs to undergird that.
Rick, we appreciate your call. Thank you very much from Penticton. Hamish Telford, fair to say the issues around climate change and the environment have taken a back seat in the face of tariff threats and other issues.
Absolutely. We're all consumed right now by Donald Trump. He sucks up all the oxygen in the room and focuses people on him. But of course, this election is going to be about all the other issues that we have to deal with in this country, including climate change. And one presumes that Donald Trump will be gone in 4 years, but climate change won't be. So Rick is absolutely right. This is not an issue that we can afford to ignore.
Let's go to Sharon, also in the Okanagan and Lake Country. Thanks for calling, Sharon. What are your big election issues?
Well, as I told the phone person, I think we have to live up, first and foremost, to our Indigenous community. We've made promises and promises and promises, and that's so lagging far behind. And the Indigenous leaders like Wab Kinew, I think, show us that when we strengthen the link, our chain, every link in our chain, we all benefit. And I think that has to be addressed. They are our original people here, and that needs to be addressed. I could go on with other things, but I'm very grateful to be Canadian. The other thing I just want to comment on is, right off the bat, I don't want to hear disrespectful language between the leaders as they in election. Already, Pierre Poilievre, and I don't belong to any political party, so I have no axe to grind. Right off the bat, he has to start talking about Carney. You know what? As I listen to Cross Country Czech, I'm always impressed by the intelligence of the Canadians and their thoughtful responses and why they believe what they believe or their perspectives. I don't need him to explain other people to me. Just explain what you're going to do and use respectful language to each other. I am sick of that kind of hurling insults back and forth by people who want to be our Prime Minister.
Sharon, we appreciate your call. Thank you very much. Hamish, you and I have covered many elections. That element of going after your opponent is alive because politics is a contact sport and certainly a blood sport, especially in this province. Any sense of how nasty or not this campaign might get?
I fear Sharon's not going to have her wish granted in this election.
Neither do I. Yeah.
I think that this is going to be a very vigorous and quite possibly nasty campaign. We know that Pierre Poilievre is, he's a self-described attack dog. And we saw how he went after Justin Trudeau over the last couple of years. I think he'll do the same to Mark Carney. But Mark Carney's no shrinking violet either, and he's willing to punch back. So I think it is going to be a very tumultuous and unpleasant campaign in that respect. But I do want to say that I think Sharon is absolutely right, that we have to consider front and center the Aboriginal peoples, Indigenous peoples in this country. We're all talking about economic resilience now in the face of Donald Trump, and people are talking about we need pipelines here and there to each direction. We have to extract natural resources. Donald Trump wants our critical minerals. And of course, most of these all lie in Indigenous territories, and we will need their consent and cooperation to do all of these things.
Mm-hmm. Let's go to Basil in Port Coquitlam. Basil, what are your main election issues?
Oh, well, just want to first say that it's really nice that CBC has such nice support staff that take our calls every day.
They're great.
Like the lady that took my Alison, and it was really it's nice to have happening for CBC callers. Yeah, my concern is that the United States has stopped U.S. aid throughout the world, and it causing tremendous suffering. I would like Canada to step up and try to help out far more than they do in trying to take the place of the U.S. and somewhat. We're a rich country, we can afford it, and let's do something about the least of these who are living overseas. So let's politicians be concerned not just about our own lives, and of course the climate crisis is a tremendous burden economically on Canada, so let's do something about that. But my first thought would be helping those overseas, especially when the USA has been so generous for many, many years, and they've stopped doing that.
Thank you, Basil. Appreciate the call. Hamish, I will get to you, respond to that in just a moment. Just looking at Pew Research, which reported that in fiscal 2023, the U.S. government dispersed $71.9 billion in foreign aid. That's according to foreignassistance.gov. I suspect that is not in the budget offing for a federal government in Canada. And while we do give foreign aid, the crater that has been left, that's not something Canada can fill on its own.
No, it's not. But Canada, I think Basil's right, that Canada could do more. We've now started talking about the underinvestment in Canada's military. We all know about this 2% figure of GDP that we're supposed to be spending on our military to meet our NATO requirements. Parties now seem to have come around to the position that we actually have to do that now. Canada had also committed, though, to spending 0.7% of GDP on foreign aid, and we currently spend only about 0.3%, so less than half of what we're supposed to be doing to meet our United Nations obligations with respect to foreign aid. And unfortunately, I don't see that number going up anytime soon. I rather suspect it might go down as we try and put more money into the military. And I think that could have, obviously with the United States pulling out of foreign aid, this could have very serious consequences for politics globally.
We're talking about the federal election call that is set for this Sunday. Sources telling CBC News and Radio-Canada that Mark Carney will go to the Governor-General, ask for Parliament to be dissolved, an election called we could be going to the polls either April 28th or May 5th. We want to hear from you. What are your major federal election issues? Give us a call, 1-800-825-5950. In Metro Vancouver, the number is 604-669-3733, pound 690 on your cell phone. Please be pulled over or hands-free when you do that. And you can email us bctoday@cbc.ca. As we wait for some more of those calls to come in, Hamish, CBC's poll tracker has the Liberals ahead for the first time in nearly 3 years, and this is resulting from 3 recent polls that have been showing very similar results, finding the Liberals would have a roughly 3 in 4 chance of winning the most seats if an election were held today. Well, the odds that Mark Carney would secure a majority government would be the equivalent of a coin toss. This is such a massive change in fortune for the Grits. Before Justin Trudeau, there were concerns whether they would hold on to party status and the Conservatives would achieve a super majority. Is it Trump? Is it just Trump's tariff threats? Is it the new leader? A combination? Where do you think this is pivoting on?
A lot of factors are at play here. And I think obviously Justin Trudeau had lost a considerable amount of public support. So him stepping down, I think, was a huge relief for millions of Canadians, compounded now with the threat of Donald Trump. And we've seen this incredible, people have galvanized, incredible display of nationalism, and people are thinking about how best to respond to that. But I think the polls are showing us that perhaps what's going on now is a lot of voters wanting to stop Pierre Poilievre. In a contest between Pierre Poilievre and Justin Trudeau, many thought that Pierre Poilievre was perhaps the lesser of 2 evils. Well, with Justin Trudeau gone, some voters are saying now Pierre Poilievre is the person who has to be stopped. And we've seen in the polls, the NDP support has collapsed. So progressive voters have gone running back to the Liberals, even though the new Liberal leader is less progressive than Justin Trudeau. The other thing that's really driving the polls is women. Women have also gone running back to the Liberals. And I think some of that stems from Pierre Poilievre's unpopularity with female voters.
Let's go to another call now. Mike is joining us in Port Hardy. Mike, what is your big election issue?
My biggest election issue is seeing leaders attacking one another at a time where we need to see 100% united leadership, considering what's going on to the south of us, seeing the rise of the new Nazi nation.
That certainly is a phrase. Mike, what is it about? How would that play out practically in your mind? Would you want like a national government, some sort of coalition? What are you thinking?
Yes, I want a coalition government. And honestly, I don't really like what the Liberals and the Conservatives have been doing with Canada for the past several decades. And I would honestly like to see more like an NDP Green coalition, but I'd like to see a coalition of all of the parties coming together to tackle Canada's crisis in the face of what's happening in the U.S.
So something similar to what BC had from about 2017 to 2020?
Yes.
Okay. Mike, appreciate your call. Thanks very much. Hamish Telford, could you give us a little history lesson? What would be involved in a national or coalition government?
Yes, well, the parties would have to form an actual coalition. We've not seen that in Canada for a very long time, going back to World War I. You require parties to come up with an agenda. There would be members of cabinet from the different parties, more or less in proportion to the party standing in the legislature. And, it could be a two-party coalition. It could be a grand coalition between 2 or 3 parties. I think it's unlikely that we are going to get that. Mm-hmm. I think that if we end up with a minority government, depending on how the numbers are, we might see another kind of legislative alliance like we saw in the last parliament between the NDP and the Liberals, or as we saw with the Greens and the NDP in BC previously. Coalition governments are very unusual in Canada, and I don't think we're quite at the crisis point yet where the parties would be willing to enter into such an arrangement. Mm-hmm.
I want to go back to the NDP for just a moment. In this province, a political science professor, senior lecturer Sanjay Jaram from SFU was on with Stephen Quinn on the early edition earlier today, asking about the fortunes of the federal NDP in BC, given some of these poll numbers. Here's what he had to say.
Because what I think will happen in British Columbia is that we'll see a sort of regression to the mean of this sort of like two-party competition. What looks like might happen is the NDP is going to be the big loser, but the sort of gains that the Liberals make in British Columbia are going to be sort of canceled out in their sort of push to a majority or minority government by Conservative gains at the NDP's expense. It looks as though, again, these polls could change, things could change, but pretty consistently we're seeing gains by the Liberals at the expense of the NDP, but also in some key ridings outside of Metro Vancouver, the Conservatives seem to be looking to pick up ridings from the NDP as well. So the NDP has a stronghold in British Columbia in terms of their overall support, but that seems to be cratering, much like it is across country. But I think it's going to hurt them even more in British Columbia. So I think.
Hamish, what do you make of what Sanjay was suggesting there?
I think that's quite likely right. If the NDP support remains low, it's possible they can stage a comeback. But if their support continues to crater, then I think we could see the Liberals poaching NDP seats in urban areas, particularly Lower Mainland, possibly even on southern Vancouver Island. Mm-hmm. But Upper Island and in the northern regions of British Columbia, up in the Stikine region, we could see the Conservatives take seats from the NDP. So if the NDP just might get squeezed by both sides here, it could be a terrible night for them. Mm.
Just before we get to Patricia, we have an email from Mark who says, in Kelowna, West Kelowna, pardon me. No, it is Kelowna. I would like to see an all-encompassing armed forces plan with an aggressive spending to protect our borders. Hamish, that has been suggested before, and we are seeing moves from the Conservatives particularly and the Liberals to say it's time to increase spending, and as you mentioned, up to levels that NATO wants to see. How long do you think that would take to spool up?
Very difficult to say. The defense minister said that it could be done as early as 2027. Justin Trudeau had set 2032 as the timeline. I think 2032 is perhaps too far out. 2027 seems perhaps rather too close to me. One of the questions is, we're 15,000 soldiers short in the military, and it's going to be difficult to spend the money on the military until we can recruit those soldiers. And that's proving to be a real challenge for the military. More broadly, for the political conversation, is how do we finance this dramatic increase in military spending? Are Canadians prepared to absorb tax increases to do it? Or are we going to cut other spending to accomplish it? Or are we going to borrow money to do it? So that's the financial question. How is not that should we? I think there's a consensus now that this is something that we have to do. Mm-hmm. How we do it, how we finance it, I think is going to be the question and the point of debate perhaps between the parties in the election.
Just before we get to our break, I am going to fit in Patricia in Cranbrook. Patricia, what is your big election issue?
Well, I actually have three, and before I get going, thank you very much for taking my call. Mm-hmm. My first one, as you were just discussing, is military. For far, far too long, we have relied on other countries to boost our military, and it's long overdue that we need to be able to look after ourselves. With a potential threat from the south now, and who knows what Putin's going to do. He could come in from the north. We need to be able to defend our borders from coast to coast, north to south. If we have to cut, as much as I hate to say it, overseas aid to do it, then we need to do that because we have to be able to protect ourselves. Mm-hmm. My second comment is renewable energy. Why are we not investing more into renewable energy? We have so many people unemployed. Give companies incentives to build renewable energy companies within Canada that we can provide our own renewable energy rather than importing from other countries. We have the capability, I am sure. We definitely have the land base to be able to do it. I don't see why we can't do our own stuff.
Okay.
And my last one is doctors. Mm. We are critically short of doctors across Canada. And it is, in this day and age, ludicrous that people within Canada cannot have a primary care physician or nurse practitioner. We need to do something. Find the money somewhere, build, make more hospitals, whatever, or more universities to train them, but we need doctors desperately.
Patricia, we appreciate your call. You got a lot in there. Bobby, I want to get to you in Surrey right now. What is your main election issue?
Yeah, thank you for taking my call. Mm-hmm. I got too much on my mind, but I'll just share a little bit. The most important issue is the sovereignty. So I don't care who's our leader, but we as people and politicians, we've been sleeping for very long, for decades. And this gentleman in the Oval Office south of the border, I don't know how we're going to put up with the rest of his term. And moving forward, who knows, what kind of person the next person is going to be in that Oval Office. So we need to spend lot of money in our Army, Navy, Air Force, coast to coast to coast. We got to defend ourselves. And just like Patricia, we need more doctors and nurses. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Bobby. Appreciate your time. As we wrap up this segment, Hamish, a lot on the list there. Military, doctors, resources, Trump. There are some general themes in there that we're hearing. Do you see this going anywhere else?
No, all of those issues are hugely important. Mm-hmm. Again, with the military, it's how we finance it is going to be the big question. Eliminating foreign aid doesn't get us close to what we have to spend on our military. There will have to be other sacrifices made to finance the military. There's a limited role for the federal government with respect to doctors. It's an immigration issue, perhaps. It's really a provincial issue. And I think there's an opportunity with what's going on in the United States for us to recruit some doctors and nurses and other medical technicians from the United States who no longer want to live there under Donald Trump. So there may be a silver lining there. And just to get back to the renewables question, I think that's something that Mark Carney has spent a lot of time thinking about. and I'll be interested to hear what he has to say about it during the election campaign.
Time and your expertise. It's going to be an interesting campaign. Thanks for joining us.
You're welcome, Dan.
You're listening to BC Today on CBC. We are on Radio 1, television, and live streaming on our website, cbc.ca/BC, YouTube, and on the CBC News app. Stay with us. We'll read some more of your calls and emails on the election issue. And we're going to look at what it will take, if we can do this, for BC to be self-sustaining when it comes to food. That's after this news break with Robert Zimmerman.
Good afternoon. 13 people, including 2 in critical condition, have been rushed to hospital after a fire early this morning in Burnaby. People living in the apartment building near Kingsway and Edmonds describe a frightening scene of alarms going off before 3 o'clock with thick smoke in the halls and stairwells. There's no word on a cause. The emergency department at the hospital in Oliver will be closed from 1 o'clock this afternoon until 7 tonight. Interior Health does not specify why the ER will be shut down. Anyone who needs emergency care are being told to travel to Penticton Regional Hospital or call 911. And the Canadian Federation of Independent Business says small business confidence here in BC has dropped to abysmal levels as the trade war between Canada and the United States ramps up. The Federation says its business barometer long-term index for BC fell more than 20 points to 26.5 in March. Anything below 50 on the scale means businesses believe performance will be down in the coming months. And now the forecast. Environment Canada is warning about snow tonight and tomorrow on sections of the Coquihalla and Highway 3. On the north coast, rain this afternoon with strong winds and a high of 8. Highs around 8 degrees with a mix of sun and cloud in the Peace. In the central interior, including Prince George, some sun and cloud with a high of 8 as well. Highs getting up to 7 with a chance of showers in the Kootenays. In the southern interior, including Kelowna, a mix of sun and cloud with a high of 10. And for Metro Vancouver, Greater Victoria, and the Fraser Valley, periods of rain this afternoon, some strong winds, and highs around 9. That's your CBC News update from Vancouver.
Rob, thanks very much. Rob Zimmerman in the CBC Vancouver newsroom. And right now, we're going to go live to Prime Minister Mark Carney. He's taking questions from reporters in Edmonton ahead of Sunday's election launch.
USMCA. Okay. So we need to recast that. What we need to do in parallel is to make sure that our industry is as competitive as possible. And I'm much more interested in increasing the competitiveness of our energy sector, of our manufacturing sector, of our AI sector, and working with industry and with provinces on specific ways to get those reductions, as opposed to, and last point, which goes to your question, as opposed to having preset caps or preset restrictions on preset timelines. Thank you.
Next question. Prime Minister, thanks for taking my question and welcome to Edmonton. And James from the Western Standard. You recently...
Sorry about the microphone.
Yeah, no problem. I'm a pretty tall guy. You have not been elected in a federal election yet. And you recently flew to Europe on government wide-body jet at the expense of at least $500,000. So the question I have for you today, and maybe I'll say this before I ask the question, these people around you all paid for that flight, and you've not been elected yet. So will you commit to refunding these taxpayers for that flight?
Well, it's an interesting question, way of framing it. Look, and I'm going to go back to... I'm going to allude to the question that was asked previously by Mr. Staples from the Journal and the situation that we're in as a country, which is we are in an economic crisis that's brought on. Sorry, I'm going to answer the question. Brought on by the tariffs that have been put on Canada, actual and prospective. One of the challenges.
The economic crisis was brought on by former Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, and you were his advisor.
I think you would find. I think you would
did not create that problem.
I certainly. Hey, nobody in Canada created that problem. Nobody in Canada created that problem. The U.S. government has decided to put tariffs on all of its closest allies. All of its closest allies. I wouldn't for a moment suggest that anyone in Canada is the cause of this. What our responsibility is to take action to react to a different world that we're in. And part of the way we do that is we build out new partnerships, new opportunities, including opportunities. And I'm going to give you a specific one, and then I don't know if you have one more follow-up, but I'll give you a specific example. It goes to my previous answer, something I also discussed with the Premier this morning, which is Canada has many advantages, and one of them is in critical metals and minerals. One of the issues is how are we going to develop the trade routes and the trade corridors rapidly in order to export those critical metals and minerals? And who are our clients for that? Who are our customers? Do we only have one customer to the south of us, a customer that's attacking us, that doesn't respect the trade agreements that they signed? Or should we develop new customers in Europe? What's required, if I may, what's required for those new customers is to build out trade corridors and infrastructure, including what I referenced in my previous answer and discussed with the Premier, is the potential to go north, go to new deepwater ports. Churchill is an example, Gray's Point in Nunavut as another. And that creates a whole new set of opportunities for Albertans as a whole, for people across the country, for these hardworking people around me and those like them in the trades. And that's what my job is.
I'll take that as a no then.
No, you'll take that as a very comprehensive answer to your question.
Thank you. Next question.
Anne Levasseur de Radio-Canada. Donald Trump, le président américain, dit qu'il préférait négocier avec
the President of the United States says that he would prefer to negotiate with a liberal than a conservative. And Poilievre answered saying that it's because he sees you as a weak person. What do you respond to that? Well, that's not true at all. It is clear that the President of the United States wants to negotiate with someone who is serious, a serious person. I am a serious person. That's the first thing. And second, the President has to show respect for our country. Our country is sovereign. And finally, there must be a comprehensive negotiation between our countries, including on economic issues and security issues.
Deuxième question. Vous avez rencontré Daniel Smith hier. Elle a clairement endossé Pierre Poilievre. Elle dit que votre plan était d'éviscérer l'Alberta.
You met with the Premier. She has said that your plan will eviscerate Alberta. Now, there's an issue with the emissions cap in particular. What is your clear plan in that area? Well, I am a practical person, a pragmatist. So, for me, the issue is we need to build. And what do we want to build? We have to build housing right across Alberta. We have programs in place that are working. Here in Edmonton, Mr. Erskine Smith, the Minister of Housing and Infrastructure, and our government will expand those programs that are working for Alberta and for Albertans. Second, we have to invest now in major energy projects here in Alberta and right across the country. Those are concrete things. They're not just words. Those are concrete things. I am here to build our economy. But are you committing to remove the emissions cap? What is important? Is to have mechanisms in place that will make it possible to reduce emissions. And it's really about results. We have to invest in order to get there, not just have legislation in place. What I want is to work with the industry here in Alberta and with the government of Alberta in order to meet that goal. What matters are results. That's what I'm interested in. And results are of interest to Canadians as well.
Speaking in Edmonton, for those of you who are watching, you may have noticed Amarjeet Sohi, former Liberal cabinet minister and Edmonton MP turned Edmonton mayor. Multiple sources tell the Edmonton Journal that he plans to run again for the Liberals somewhere in Edmonton. Again, Amarjeet Sohi standing next to Mark Carney at a news conference in Edmonton. Many of you have emailed in on our top story. What are your big election priorities and issues as we head to an election? And we're going to read just a few of those right now. Let's have a look. Laura writes us to say, as a person who has just moved back from Australia after 12 years, I'm struck at how Canada has stayed the exact same. It feels like no new innovation, industry, etc. We can't continue to hitch our wagon to the U.S. The Liberals have done this. We can't continue to stay the same. We're no longer the 90s. Fresh ideas, people. David says, along with addressing climate change in Indigenous and small communities and in all our housing and green public transportation policies, I believe the federal government needs to support the provinces more in bolstering our higher education system. We need to do what Asian tiger economies have done so well, and that is invest in colleges and universities, protect and bolster our core programs, and work with these schools to diversify our economy. And Karen writes, my number one election issue is accelerating climate solutions like investments in renewable energy and continuing to tax corporations for the carbon pollution they emit. Thank you very much for your many emails. We'll have many of the top stories are coming up in your region. If you're a storyteller or language learner on the coast has something for you this afternoon, here's Gloria to tell us more.
Hi there, Dan. It's Gloria Makarenko here, inviting you to join us for On the Coast this afternoon. The TELUS Story Hive is launching a Pan-Asian storytelling edition, and to mark the occasion, they're hosting a filmmaker chat with one of the co-founders of Wong Fu Productions. That's a renowned Asian-American independent production company, so we will hear from him and from the talk moderator as well. And today is International Francophonie Day, so we're going to be talking with a language expert about linguistic insecurity. That's when you develop some discomfort or even anxiety when you're attempting to use your language. So I'm looking forward to that conversation. I hope you can join us between 3 and 6 for On the Coast.
Merci. Thanks very much, Gloria. Merci beaucoup. You can hear On the Coast on CBC Radio 1 in Metro Vancouver and anywhere on the CBC News app. Amid trade tensions, political unrest, and a multitude of tariffs set to be imposed by the U.S., the dialogue has been brewing these past few months on how Canada and BC can become a self-sustaining and sustainable country, one in which we're not dependent on the trade of other countries, such as the U.S., or perhaps to the extent that we are. To start, a self-sustainable agriculture system is high in the minds of food growers and innovators. BC's Agriculture Ministry says our farmers produce 40% of all the foods consumed in the province. What about that other 60%, though? We're asking you, what does BC need to be more self-sustaining? Give us a call, 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733 is our number in Metro Vancouver, pound 690 on your cell phone. And you can email us, bctoday@cbc.ca. And many of you already have. We appreciate it. So joining us today is an expert, Lenore Newman, director of the Food and Agricultural Institute at the University of the Fraser Valley and the co-lead of a new initiative called Sustainable Food Systems for Canada. Lenore, good to have you on the program again.
Great to be here, and good afternoon.
So tell us about this new program, Sustainable Food Systems for Canada. Ottawa has invested just over $16 million to boost our agri-food power. How's this going to work?
Yes, so it emerged in part out of the challenges we faced during the COVID pandemic. And across the country, we have a lot of experts in the field of agriculture and agricultural innovation. And we realized we really need to be working together to create a pan-Canadian approach to this issue. So we put together a package to train young people to take part in this emerging industry, because after all, a lot of us are in universities, it's what we do, to mentor startup companies to really become world leaders in activating these technologies, and lastly, to convene meetings between people who wouldn't otherwise be in the room together. So industry and academy, and bringing in policymakers and making sure that it's C to C to C. And we were lucky enough to receive funding. So now we get to roll out across the country.
So at this point, is there an end line, a goal line? Is this getting everybody getting more technology updated? Is it training farmers, vertical agriculture? Is there a finish line for you?
Well, personally, my finish line has always been, I feel that Canada should be one of the top 3 agricultural superpowers on Earth. And right now, the Netherlands and the US are definitely ahead of us. We're ranked usually 6 or 7, maybe 8, depending on how you measure it. But we should be in the top 3 because we produce amazing food, but we also produce amazing innovation, and we need to put those 2 things together.
What are the Netherlands and the US doing well that we could do? And keeping in mind the Netherlands could fit many times over into BC.
Well, they're a great success story, aren't they? Because they're so small, and yet they're one of the world's biggest agricultural exporters in terms of dollar value. And more importantly, they're a technological superpower. And that really came about because of the sort of challenge we're facing now, except much more extreme, in that they went hungry in World War II.
Indeed.
And afterwards said, well, food is a national security issue. How do we make sure that never happens? And they did this by focusing on what they call the triple helix, having government and industry and universities working together to develop technology so they can produce food year-round, which is, of course, really applicable to us as well.
And what about the U.S.? What is it that they're doing that we can apply here? And keeping in mind we're a bigger landmass, but they have so many more people.
Well, a great example from the U.S. is when I say the word Silicon Valley, most people think technology. They get that part, but they don't realize that Silicon Valley is also an agricultural superpower. And those 2 things go hand in hand. So one of the things they've done really well is realize the role technology plays in producing more food with less land and less inputs at lower cost. And we really can learn from that because we need to build the same sort of ecosystem where industry is working really closely with emerging technology to make sure we're producing as much food as possible so that we're a little buffered from these global shocks.
John, we're going to get to your call in just a moment. I want to do another call out. We're talking about sustainable food systems. How can BC and Canada become sustainable when it comes to food? Can we do this? Our number is 1-800-825-5950. In Metro Vancouver, it's 604-669-3733. Email us, bctoday@cbc.ca, and many of you have. We appreciate it. Pound 690 on your cell phone. John is joining us from Kelowna. John, what do you think about self-sustainability when it comes to food in BC?
Well, when it comes to food in BC, I think there should be a lot more of that. For instance, I've just ordered an Australian product for aeroponics so that I can grow my own leafy greens and vegetables.
How does the device work?
Well, it's essentially drips nutrients to where the roots need it, and it's self-sustaining, and there's no water waste.
How big is it, John?
It's actually about 4 cubic feet, and it's about 4 to 5 feet tall, and that's it.
What made you buy it?
Oh, I just like the fact that it's portable. You can move it. It's on wheels. It doesn't take a lot of water. It doesn't take a lot of electricity to run it, and it's handy for what I need.
John, we appreciate your call. Thanks very much. Lenore, I saw you nodding along a little bit there. What do you make of John's approach?
Well, first off, great idea. And I get excited whenever I hear about people starting to try and grow leafy greens and herbs at home. And because it's one of our weakest links. in that we actually have all the carbohydrates we could ever use. We're one of the world's suppliers of grains and beans, etc. And when it comes to supply management, even though that's directly under attack by the U.S., it's still producing us really good product at a stable price. It's why our eggs are not, we're not having the same problem they're having in the U.S. But our leafy greens, small fruits, all the things we know we should be eating more of to be healthy, they've been a weak link, both during the pandemic, during the flooding we experienced in BC, and of course now in a time of disrupted trade with the US. So we need to be producing them here year-round. Other countries have realized this. I mean, the Netherlands is a leader, but so is Japan. They have really moved ahead, and that's an area we've started to get a bit of a running start. And it really helps that Canada has so much green electricity, because that's, of course, the main ingredient in that industry.
Douglas writes us to say, having just returned from Cuba and from cycling trips there since 2001, their neighborhood by neighborhood Organiponico program since the 90s is a success model for the world. Find home, grow food is what it is all about. We also have Colleen who says, please, let's revive the Stone Fruits Distribution Co-op. What a tragedy BC allowed this historic piece of food infrastructure to die. Irrational. Lenore, I guess we can add that to the pile was the BC Tree Fruits Cooperative that went into receivership. A lot of stress for those fruit growers in the Okanagan, among other places. Where do you see those programs going in the future? Do we need them back?
Oh, we totally do. And it's really interesting to me that in BC, we've really let our processing industry lag a little bit. And part of that was because it's been very easy to ship things south of the border, process them into other products, and then bring them back. And so you get this weird situation where we just, to be fair, it made sense to be moving raw product around the globe. But we are now seeing the weakness in that, and we need as much processing as possible. And we know there's some regulatory challenges. I think the government in BC has been looking to address this. We know that the national government's looking, how do we produce more things ready for the table? But it needs to be a priority. And I'll admit, I was quite sad when the Tree Fruit Cooperative failed. I mean, that's like a 100-year-old brand in BC. Those little leaf stickers, and yes, we need it all back, because this is the kind of global situation where you really see the value in that.
Let's go to Kelly in Armstrong. Thanks for waiting, Kelly. What do you think of being self-sustainable?
Well, I was actually just calling. My question was on part to do with the the co-op shutting down. Because they do still have, by the way, a fair amount of assets. Yeah. So I think that could be salvaged. I would like to put that out there by maybe a group of government and business going in together to do that. But what came out of that at the time was I discovered that the reason, too, that the apples on our trees rotted, basically, because there wasn't the co-op to take them in, was because we import our apples from Washington. They're subsidized. They come into our country cheaper and then puts our farmers out of business because they don't have a market now for their apples.
Yeah. Kelly, appreciate your call. I'm going to put that to Lenore as we come up to the top of the hour. Lenore?
Yeah, I think there's definitely room for, hopefully the government is looking at some sort of resuscitation package for, as you point out, there is significant assets and potential to revive the co-op and to make sure the other co-ops and other parts of the sector remain vibrant. And we really do need to start, and one of the, I mean, I hate to say there's a silver lining to the terrible situation we've been in, but for once, people are really asking, well, how could I support Canadian farmers and Canadian producers and processors? And if we can keep that mindset, we can really push back against, product that sometimes is being brought in more cheaply because of offshore subsidies we don't control.
Mm-hmm. Let's go to Kirsten in Victoria. And Kirsten, if you can keep it short, but you're on.
So as brief as I can, I believe that there's a few simple ways that we can help with the sustainability in the province. First of all, we need to increase composting services throughout the province so we can put back what we use into the soil so we can keep the regenerative circle. Second, we need to get children out of the classrooms and into the field. And if we can't do that, we need to get farmers into the classroom so we can teach children where their food comes from and get them interested in agriculture. And thirdly, food shares, and we need, to piggyback on Lenore, we need to get more people knowledgeable in processing food, and we need to get it as a communal effort.
All right. Thanks so much. We're going to squeeze in Sam. Sam, I have about 20 seconds. Go ahead.
Hi. So I'm a horticulturist, and my passion is growing crops growing plants that we can grow here in BC that we can't grow anywhere else in the country. And especially in South Coastal BC, we have the mildest climate in Canada, yet we tend to grow exactly the same crops as elsewhere in the country. And that's a huge missed opportunity.
Sam, forgive me, the line is breaking up a little bit, but I hear you. Lenore, I'll ask you to weigh in as we wrap up.
Yeah, one thing I will say is I totally agree with Stan. And recently I visited a farm in the Fraser Valley that was looking at doing artichokes, which is more traditionally a California crop. But they do okay here now, especially with the shifting in climate. And we need to get a little creative because we'll always be trading for some things, for tropicals, etc. But why not have a little more variety domestically and see what we can do. And I think more research on that is definitely well worth it.
Lenore Newman joining us from the Food and Agricultural Institute at the University of Fraser Valley. Thank you so much for your time and your expertise. And that's for our show. Thanks for calling and joining the discussion, and email us at bctoday@cbc.ca.